Chapter 521. Thick flames soared into the sky, and the series of explosions caused the surrounding ground to shake violently. Although there was no one else in the factory, there were a few families nearby. They were all shocked and hurriedly went out to take a look. They saw that the red flames had dyed half the sky, and a thick cloud of smoke was drifting over. Wild dogs were barking everywhere. There were many old things in the factory, all of which were flammable and explosive. The fire would burn for a long time. Jing Yunjiao looked at the sleeping Su Chu in her space and decided to insert a few needles into a few of her acupuncture points. There weren't any side effects, and instead, it allowed her to sleep more comfortably. At this time, she couldn't go out of the factory. She could only wait for the surrounding flames to die down a little before looking for a way out. Not long after, in the distance, a helicopter was getting closer and closer. The fire trucks and police cars were also about to arrive. "Boss, it's already on fire," a man next to him said carefully. Li Xiaoyun's pupils constricted as he stared down. His face was terrifyingly gloomy, and the murderous intent around him made people tremble. They had never seen him like this before. Li Xiaoyun comforted himself in his heart. Jing Yunjiao was so smart. Perhaps she had already found a way to escape. Even so, looking at the fire, he still felt a chill in his heart. The helicopter slowly landed. Li Xiaoyun rushed over like a madman and raised his foot to rush into the fire. When the man next to him saw this, he quickly stepped forward to protect him. He was dumbfounded and said, "Boss, such a big fire. Even a god will be burned to death. If it was an ordinary fire, there might be a chance of survival, but this place had exploded several times in a row." However, it had to be said that although Jing Yunjiao was a little girl, she had the guts to save people single-handedly. Although she didn't save them, her boldness was incomparable to a man's. It was a pity. If she could delay for some time, whether it was the police or them, they could have arrived. After all, it was still too far away. They flew over from Serene City in the shortest time. Even the police and fire brigade of Huaning City were dispatched as soon as possible, but they were still a step too late. "Get lost." Li Xiaoyun's voice was as cold as iron. They swallowed their saliva and said, "Boss, the fire truck is here, get lost." Li Xiaoyun shouted again. However, he didn't wait for these people to react and directly pushed them away. The next moment, he directly rushed to the broken factory. The flames had been burning for a long time, and it was much better than before. However, when Li Xiaoyun approached, a burst of thick smoke came out, and his body suddenly became a little more miserable. Following the place where the flames were the weakest, he charged in without saying a word. The fire engine at the back hurriedly got ready. Streams of water sprayed out, and the contact between the extreme cold and the extreme heat produced a series of sizzling sounds that made one's scalp go numb. Jing Yunjiao was inside the space, but she could feel that someone was approaching. Although she could see the surrounding scene through the thick smoke, she didn't know who it was. However, she was certain that this person was not Hu Qiong, because she had personally witnessed Hu Qiong being engulfed by the explosion's power and flames. Because of the explosion, there was a pile of waste around her. Because this was the first place to burn, it was still calm now, but the temperature was a little high. Now that someone was looking for her, Jing Yunjiao didn't dare to stay in the space. After all, this space didn't mean that it would always be safe. The position she entered the space could only be the same as when she came out, but because of the explosion, a lot of the surrounding area had collapsed. If she went out a little later, she was afraid that she would be imprisoned in the mess. At that time, no one would help her, and it would be difficult for her to escape with Su Chu. Chapter 522. After a wave of thick smoke dispersed, Jing Yunjiao protected Su Chu and returned to the fire scene. The surrounding heat waves were rolling, layer after layer, and the trembling stone wall above them seemed like it would fall down in the next second. The surrounding was blocked by the debris after the explosion. Jing Yunjiao and Su Chu couldn't move at all. Bang! Jing Yunjiao only heard a heavy object fall down, as if it was kicked to the side by someone. Her heart skipped a beat. She looked up and took a deep breath. The thing above could fall down at any time, but if she returned to the space again, when she reappeared, she would still be imprisoned here. Moreover, The surrounding area was too small. She might not be able to bring Suchu out with her. Just as she was about to call for help, Jing Yunjiao choked on the smoke and coughed. Jiao. About 10 meters away, a familiar voice sounded. Jing Yunjiao was surprised. It was actually Li Xiaoyun. Wasn't he still in Ning City? At this time, even if he used his fastest speed, he wouldn't be able to reach here. How could, Li Xiaoyun? I'm here. Jing Yunjiao didn't have the time to think too much and hurriedly spoke. After she finished speaking, she knocked on the surrounding rocks, producing a clear sound. Li Xiaoyun breathed a sigh of relief. In this fire scene, he followed the sound. His speed was very fast. After a while, the two of them were only separated by a stone. This stone seemed to be glowing red and was incomparably hot. However, Jing Yunjiao saw the stone pillar in front of her constantly moving to the side at a steady speed. A few minutes later, it crashed to the ground. Jing Yunjiao looked at the person in front of her in shock. Suddenly, she had an indescribable feeling. Just as she was about to open her mouth, Li Xiaoyun suddenly reached out and pressed on her shoulder, making her squat down. In an instant, a figure appeared in front of her. Bang! The big stone above their head finally fell down and smashed on Li Xiaoyun's back. Suddenly, Jing Yunjiao stared at him in shock. She was puzzled, flustered, worried, and afraid. At this moment, Li Xiaoyun was only a few centimeters away from her. Under the gravity, his heavy breathing sounded especially heavy. Jing Yunjiao was about to speak when Li Xiaoyun said, "Don't be afraid. It'll be fine in a while." In an instant, Jing Yunjiao froze. At this moment, everyone outside was already busy. The water kept rushing towards the fire. The fire was getting smaller and smaller, but the smoke was still there. In the narrow space, the oxygen was extremely low. The three of them found it extremely difficult to breathe. Fortunately, there were still many brothers outside. Therefore, not long after, Jing Yunjiao vaguely saw people rushing over and removing the stone pillars on Li Xiaoyun's body. One by one, they hurriedly helped the three of them out. The air outside made him feel relieved, and he fainted. Jing Yunjiao's mind was filled with the scene of Li Xiaoyun standing in front of her, shielding her from harm. He seemed to be a little different from the Li Xiaoyun she knew. Although she had always treated Li Xiaoyun as a friend, it was a little different because his identity made her somewhat afraid. The young master of a wealthy family was too far away from her. Therefore, even if she did not have any ill feelings towards Li Xiaoyun, she had always maintained a calm and vigilant heart towards him. She did not completely trust him. In her impression, Li Xiaoyun was arrogant and unreliable. However, she never thought that such a person would help her without caring about his own life. After staying in the darkness for an unknown period of time, Jing Yunjiao slowly opened her eyes. What entered her eyes was a sea of white. There was a smell of medicine in the surroundings. It was undoubtedly the hospital. Chapter 523. As soon as Jing Yunjiao opened his eyes, he was surrounded by people. "Yunjiao!" Xiao Haiqing rushed forward and scolded, "What's wrong with you? Why did you go to that lousy factory with Chu Chu? You scared me to death." Tang Zihua was next to her, and Gan Jinchen was next to the other bed. He also breathed a sigh of relief. The room was full of people. The whole Gan family was there. After all, Suchu had such a big accident. It was quite a shock to the family. "How do you feel?" Tang Zihua's thick eyebrows relaxed as he quickly asked. Jing Yunjiao rubbed his head and struggled to get up. "I'm fine. How's Chu Chu? Her life isn't in danger. She just seems to have taken some hypnotic drugs. She should sleep for 2 more days. There are no other injuries on her body," Tang Zihua said. "What about Li Xiao?" Jing Yunjiao asked again. Ask. You only know how to ask others. Why don't you ask yourself first?" Xiao Haiqing was furious, but when she saw Jing Yunjiao's worried expression, she still said, "He suffered external injuries. The burns on his back are more serious. There's some internal bleeding, but it's already been treated. He's sleeping in a single ward now, and there's a group of scary people accompanying him." When Xiao Haiqing received the news, Jing Yunjiao had already been sent to the hospital. At that time, She was really shocked. She quickly asked the group of people what was going on. Who knew that they were even fiercer than she was? It was as if they were going to eat her up. However, according to what they said, Li Xiaoyun had rushed into the fire to save Jingyun Zhao and Su Chu without any regard for his own life. He had blocked the falling rocks for Jingyun Zhao and Su Chu. He had clenched his teeth and only spat out blood when he sent them to the car. Previously, he had been holding on with all his might. If it weren't for Li Xiaoyun, even if Jingyun Zhao and Su Chu weren't hit in the head by the stones, they would still be stuck inside and wouldn't be able to get out. It would be more difficult to rescue them. There was already a lack of oxygen and a lot of toxins inside. If they stayed there for too long, they would become mentally retarded or even lose their lives. "I'll go take a look," Jingyun Zhao quickly said when he heard Xiao Haiqing's words. After saying that, he stood up. Her injuries weren't too serious, but the surface of her body was still affected by the explosion. There were even some scars on her face, so in other people's eyes, Jingyun Zhao had just experienced a life-and-death situation. At this moment, she should be resting and lying down on her bed. Xiao Haiqing pushed her back without another word. "There's no need to rush. Young Master Li also needs to rest. You won't be able to thank him even if you go over now. Besides, if there's a problem, they'll inform the doctor immediately. Grandpa Gan will also go over to help. It's fine. Yun Zhao, listen to Haiqing. It's better for you to rest now. There will be people asking you a lot of questions later." As soon as Tang Zihua finished speaking, the police came in. When they saw Jingyun Zhao, they asked directly, "Jingyun Zhao, how are you now? Can you tell me what happened?" Xiao Haiqing snorted. What else could she do? That was an explosion. It was reported on the television, and they even interviewed the residents nearby. They said that the surrounding houses shook violently. However, in order to prevent this incident from causing too much of a reaction, the news that there was someone inside was suppressed. Outsiders only thought of it as a normal accident. Jingyun Zhao nodded. The police officer had a pen and paper in his hand to take notes. Moreover, he had received information from Li Xiaoyun beforehand, so he knew that Hu Qiong was responsible for this incident. "We've already gone to Hu Qiong's current residence to investigate. There's a woman called Zhong Qing inside. She's now under our control." Chapter 524. The owner of the house is related to Hu Qiong, and Hu Qiong himself is a rather introverted person. He used to be a student at a university in Serene City, but he was expelled after causing a small-scale explosion in his laboratory. His grandfather used to be the old butler of the Hong family, so he and Hong Wen can be considered childhood sweethearts. After Hu Qiong was expelled from school, the Hong family found him a job on account of their past friendship. The police first explained Hu Qiong's situation in detail. According to them, Hu Qiong vented his anger on Hong when after learning of her death and returned to Huaning County to take revenge. The original residents of the place where he temporarily lived did not move, but their entire family was killed. At that time, it was the new year, and the children of the old head of the household had returned home. Hu Qiong killed them overnight and hid the bodies in the basement. After dealing with them, he told the neighbors that the old man was picked up by his children. When the police searched the basement, they were all shocked. There were 6 incomplete bodies in the basement. One was an old man, and the rest were 2 children, as well as the old man's son, daughter, and daughter-in-law. The victims' cell phones were also found inside. There were text messages on them. Hu Qiong borrowed their cell phones to send a group text message, saying that he took his old father on a trip. Because the children of this family were indeed prepared to go on a trip, no one came to find them. After Hu Qiong killed 6 people, he sealed them with all kinds of strange medicine. When they saw it, the meat was like sausages, and it looked particularly disgusting. The entire basement was mixed with the smell of stench and medicine, and it was very pungent. In addition, many bomb components were found in the basement. And those corpses, when the police thought about it now, they felt that they could not bear it. The flesh on their bodies was mostly cut off, and some were even tidied up piece by piece. Looking at the basement, Hu Qiong should have spent a lot of time with the corpses. This was simply terrifying to the extreme. At present, the evidence was complete, and there was no doubt. The police's purpose was just to confirm. In other words, after the other party deceived the Zhong brothers to kidnap Suchu, you went to rescue her alone, is that right? The police asked again. That's right. Jing Yunjiao said. At present, every word Jing Yunjiao said was very important to the Zhong family of 3. However, Jing Yunjiao had no intention of letting them go to jail. They were just accomplices. Even if they went to jail, they wouldn't die. They would have food and drinks, and they might even learn some skills. How could she let the 3 siblings benefit from such a thing? She would let them live a life worse than death. Jing Yunjiao, according to the explosion index at that time, the possibility of your survival should be 0. Because of the explosion, I feel a bit of a headache. There are some things that I don't remember very clearly. I hope you guys can forgive me. I only know that the power of the explosion was indeed very strong. As for how I managed to dodge it, I think it might really be a miracle, Jing Yunjiao said directly. The other party was stunned for a moment, but after thinking about it, it made sense. The explosion was so big that even the onlookers were shocked, not to mention Jing Yunjiao, who had experienced it firsthand. The mastermind of this accident is dead. Don't worry, there won't be such a thing in the future. The other party kindly reminded her, for fear that this little girl would fall into such a shadow and not be able to get out. Jing Yunjiao nodded. The mastermind was indeed dead, but that didn't mean that some people could pretend that nothing had happened. Chapter 525. The police asked some other questions as usual, and the people who recorded the information did not continue to disturb him. Jing Yunjiao went to the ward next door to take a look. In front of the bed, there were 6 chairs. 6 men sat side by side, staring at Li Xiaoyun on the bed without saying a word. They looked very serious. No wonder Xiao Haiqing said that these people were a little scary. Jing Yunjiao knocked on the door and walked in. The 6 of them stood up instantly. They looked at each other and suddenly gave Jing Yunjiao a thumbs up. Little girl, as expected of the woman that our boss likes. You have guts. Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. How is he? Don't worry, I promise he won't die. One of them smiled and said. Jing Yunjiao looked at them and walked over to sit by the bed. He found Li Xiaoyun lying on the bed with medicine on his back. Jing Yunjiao did not know much about Western medicine, but judging from the extent of the injury, it was indeed quite serious. He took his pulse and was even more shocked. Li Xiaoyun was under great pressure and his internal organs were damaged. However, he had a foundation in martial arts, so it was not life-threatening. If it was an ordinary person, they would have died on the spot. Please let me know when he wakes up. Thank you. Jing Yunjiao looked at them and said seriously. These people were about the same age as Li Xiaoyun, but their appearance was very different. Li Xiaoyun had a noble aura, while these people looked steady. Some looked like wastrels, and some looked like ordinary sunshine men. If they took off their military uniforms, it was impossible to tell their true professions. However, birds of a feather flock together. These people had some similarities with Li Xiaoyun, and that was their serious appearance. Little sister-in-law, don't worry. Our boss is willing to risk his life for you, so you are one of us. I promise to let you know when he wakes up. By the way, you can call me 7th brother. The ones next to me are 2nd brother, then 6th brother. We will have many opportunities to get along in the future. Now, we won't be polite with you. 7th brother, you are quite bold. Sister-in-law calls you 7th brother? You wish. Old 6, who was beside him, immediately said. Old 7 rolled his eyes. Don't tell me you don't want to. Anyway, boss isn't awake now. You don't have to change the way you address him, right? The corner of Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. Young Master Li and I are friends. You guys might have misunderstood. Also, since he's still unconscious, I won't disturb your brotherly bond. I'll leave first. Oh right, here's some medicine for burns. You can try it on him. The effect should be much better than the ones in the hospital. Jing Yunjiao took out a bottle of medicine from the space and placed it in old 7's hand. These medicines were prepared by her when she was in the space, just in case she needed them. She had now absorbed nearly half of the spirit jade, so her medical skills were no longer comparable to the past. The medicine she concocted had a strong healing ability. Li Xiaoyun's current injury was new, so if he used it on time, the possibility of leaving a scar was not high. They winked at each other and immediately said, "Understood, sister-in-law. Please have a safe trip." Friends. Little sister-in-law treated their boss as a friend, but their boss's purpose was definitely not simple. Li Xiaoyun was someone who didn't want strangers to get close to him. Loyalty was a given, but it also depended on the time. There weren't many people who could receive the blessings of his god of loyalty. Yet Jing Yunjiao, a little girl, was able to make Li Xiaoyun disregard everything. How could the meaning behind this be unclear? Chapter 526. Jing Yunjiao came out of the ward, the tips of her ears were slightly red. She took another look through the glass window, then turned and left. She lifted her feet to return to her own ward, and found that there were a few more classmates in the room. They even brought 2 bouquets of flowers over, especially for her and Suchu. This treatment made her surprised. Jing Yunjiao's injuries weren't serious, and she had already done various examinations while she was in a coma. The doctor said that she could be discharged at any time, but Xiao Haiqing was still worried. Only when old man Gan checked her pulse in front of everyone and confirmed that there were no major problems, did she finally let go. "Yunjiao, you're really lucky. The scene has already been blown up like that, but you're still intact. Suchu is even better. If she didn't take the sleeping medicine, I'm afraid she would still be jumping around. Tell me the truth, did you master the golden bell shield?" Xiao Haiqing laughed. She simply prostrated herself in admiration. She had seen the report of the scene of the explosion, and only a pile of twisted scrap metal was left. "I'm going to take a look at the Hu family. Are you coming?" Jing Yunjiao changed the topic. Xiao Haiqing froze for a moment. Who family?" Tang Zihua and Gan Jinshan's faces twisted. "Yunjiao, that family of 6 people died. What are you going to do there?" The 6 people's bodies were still in the Hu family. Because the bodies weren't complete, it was said that they were still searching. Logically speaking, she couldn't go, but after all, she was one of the victims of this case, and with Li Xiaoyun's relationship with those brothers, this small matter wasn't a problem. But in the eyes of the 3 people, it was a little scary. Isn't Zhongqing still cooperating with the investigation at the Hu family? Jing Yunjiao smiled, but it was cold and penetrating. Xiao Haiqing and the other 2 looked at each other, and they were a little scared. Especially when they saw Jing Yunjiao's scary expression, they felt a chill run down their backs. "I still have to accompany Chu Chu, forget it, Ian." "I'll accompany Chu Chu too," the 2 boys blushed and hurriedly said. When Xiao Haiqing heard this, the corner of her mouth twitched. Seeing them so cowardly, her fighting spirit was stimulated. "Yunjiao, I'll go with you." They didn't know much about the cause of the matter, but they were certain that if it weren't for the 3 siblings of the Zhong family, Jing Yunjiao and Suchu wouldn't have encountered such great danger. They felt a little indignant if they didn't check on Zhongqing's current situation. After Xiao Haiqing said that, Gan Jinchen and Tang Zihua felt even more embarrassed. The 2 girls were so bold. Their reactions were a little too unmanly. "Even Haiqing is going. Then let's go take a look. Young Master Tang, can you do it?" Gan Jinchen bit the bullet and pulled Tang Zihua along. The 2 of them had similar personalities, but in comparison, Tang Zihua was more concerned about his reputation, while Gan Jinchen was braver. Now that Gan Jinchen said that, even if Tang Zihua was unwilling, he still said, "It's just the dead. If they didn't do anything wrong, they shouldn't be afraid of ghosts knocking on the door. Let's just go." Xiao Haiqing's heart was secretly happy. She was fearless since she was young, but when she heard that the victims died more tragically, she felt a little disgusted. But this kind of thing was something that she got used to. At most, she wouldn't eat dinner. When the few of them decided to go, Qi Daong and the other classmates who came to visit Jing Yunjiao and Suchu looked a little frightened. However, they didn't have that much courage. They only gave the 4 of them a few encouraging looks, and in the next second, they hurriedly left the hospital. Chapter 527. The Hu family area was filled with 2-story houses. Most of the houses were of the same style, surrounded by high walls and sealed iron doors. It looked dark and damp. The Hu family's left and right sides of the road were cordoned off. When the incident first happened, there were more people around. Now that a few hours had passed and it was time for dinner, there were not many people left. Moreover, because they heard that this family had died miserably, the neighbors were also afraid that they would be tainted with bad luck at this time. What a sin. He didn't even let the old and the children go. That Chongzi is really a good-for-nothing old man who was so good to him and treated him like his own grandson. When Jing Yunjiao arrived, there were still a few people watching. She only saw an old lady wiping her tears and saying sadly, "Having such relatives is really bad luck of 8 lifetimes. Speaking of which, I'm really scared. Previously, I went to their house to borrow something. At that time, that Chongzi looked at me with a strange and scary gaze. Fortunately, I was lucky," another person said. Jing Yunjiao sighed. This family was indeed an unexpected disaster. It could be said that they died indirectly because of her. The police did not implicate her in the statement released by the public. They only said that this Hu Chong was suspected of having a mental illness. Jing Yunjiao specially found a police officer who stayed in the hospital to accompany her, so she walked smoothly all the way. The moment she stepped into the Hu family's door, she felt a stifling atmosphere and that strange smell. Her sense of smell was very sensitive. At this time, the smell was even more invisibly magnified and was very pungent. She only saw that there were 6 corpses in the courtyard and some pieces of packaged meat. Zhong Qing was squatting in a corner, her face full of horror. She did not dare to raise her head to look. Tears kept falling, and her entire mind was broken. She thought that Hu Wenhong was a good person, but she did not expect that he was not called Hu Wenhong at all, but Hu Chong. He was a pervert, a complete pervert. No wonder he did not let her go to the basement. It turned out that there were so many corpses inside. The old people and the children were all stripped naked and treated like pickled pork. It looked extremely disgusting. As soon as they entered the courtyard, their faces turned ugly. This Hu Chong is simply a bastard. This child looks only 8 or 9 years old. Xiao Haiqing's eyes were red. Behind him, Tang Zihua and Gan Jinchen also glanced at him. However, in the next second, they only saw Tang Zihua turn around and rush out, vomiting directly. How could old Master Tang's golden grandson have seen such things? Although Gan Jinchen had never seen it before, he had learned medicine from his grandfather and had seen some bloody scenes. Although his face was extremely pale, he could still bear it. Xiao Haiqing's stomach was also filled with acid, and her whole person seemed to be shrouded in dark clouds. Jing Yunjiao's expression wasn't any better, but he had already made preparations beforehand. In addition, he had dealt with the corpses of the snakes, insects, rats, and ants when he was making the medicine. When he saw this person, his acceptance level was slightly higher than the other 3. He took a deep breath and walked over. The flesh on the 6 people's bodies had been mostly removed, and a part of it had been neatly cut off and sealed in a bag. However, the more organized it was, the more unacceptable it was. Even the police were vomiting and crying. Jing Yunjiao's face was pale as he squatted beside the corpses and looked at them. Although a lot of flesh had been found on these corpses, there was still a lot missing. Chapter 528. Jing Yunjiao's appearance made the faces of Xiao Haiqing and the others twist, especially Tang Zihua. He had just finished vomiting, but when he saw Jing Yunjiao staring at the corpse so calmly, he couldn't stand it anymore and went out to vomit again. Even the policeman next to them looked at Jing Yunjiao as if they had seen a ghost. Strange things happened every year, but this year there were especially many. Such a horrible corpse, even men like them couldn't stand looking at it, but this little girl was actually observing it at such a close distance. She looked extremely serious, and even gave them a feeling of piety. It was simply like seeing a ghost. After a while, Jing Yunjiao walked to the basement again. The basement area was about 100 square meters. It should have been divided into 2 or 3 rooms, but now the walls of each room were broken through. The floor was a mess. Stones, garbage bags, and all kinds of things were thrown all over the floor. It looked a little dirty. There were also traces of mice and some insects on the ground, and the smell was mixed. In the entire basement, the only thing that could be considered clean was the table placed in the middle of the room. There were still some test tubes and other things left on top of it. She reckoned that the medicine was something Hu Qiong had researched on his own. However, the important things had already been taken back for testing, so Jing Yunjiao couldn't see anything. In addition, there were the remnants of the bomb. The smell of gunpowder was very strong, but only some residue powder was left. The finished products or semi-finished products were all transported to the factory by Hu Qiong. "Haven't you found the rest of the body?" Jing Yunjiao looked at the police and asked. "We're still looking. The meat was originally put in the freezer in the basement, but the amount is still not enough. We've also looked upstairs, but there's nothing left in the freezer except some leftovers." Jing Yunjiao nodded. However, she thought of the possibility of Hu Qiong being a pervert and asked, could it have been eaten by him? It wasn't that she was thinking too much, but she had seen Hu Qiong before. That person was extremely sinister, and his mind was in a state of madness. What she said was completely possible. It was just that when Jing Yunjiao said this, the corners of the others' mouths couldn't help but twitch. Tang Zihua originally thought that he wouldn't be able to see any disgusting corpses in the basement, but he didn't expect to hear Jing Yunjiao say such shocking words. In an instant, his 3 views completely collapsed, and he even vomited out his bile. Not to mention Tang Zihua, even Gan Jinchen couldn't hold it in anymore. Although Xiao Haiqing was usually so tough that she didn't seem like a girl, she was still a normal person after all. She didn't immediately jump. The 3 of them simply went out together and stayed at the door, not wanting to take even half a step closer. He reckoned that he would be able to save some rations tonight. In fact, he might not even want to touch any meat for the next few months. The police officer and Jing Yunjiao went upstairs to take a look at the fridge. Their expressions were strange when they saw the plate of stir-fried bacon. "Give me this plate of meat, it's not just any meat," the forensic doctor suddenly said and took the plate of meat away from Jing Yunjiao's hands. It was clear what he meant at a glance. Jing Yunjiao had originally only made a conjecture based on Hu Qiong's personality. She simply did not think that the truth would be as she had predicted. Her expression was unsightly to the extreme, and her stomach was similarly churning. But when she turned her head to look at Zhongqing, who was still crying in the courtyard, her feelings became even more complicated. "Little girl, don't touch the things in this house casually. If you dirty your hands, you have to wash them. The sink over there can't be used for the time being. There's a lot of minced meat in it, enough to cook a dish." Chapter 529. The forensic doctor saw that Jing Yunjiao was bold and deliberately opened his mouth to scare him. It could be seen that her expression was the same as before. Although she was a little agitated, she was still calm. He was somewhat impressed in his heart. This girl was quite suitable for their line of work. Jing Yunjiao didn't know what the forensic doctor was thinking. After wandering around, he lifted his foot and walked in Zhongqing's direction. There was a policeman beside Zhongqing watching. Because he suspected that she was an accomplice, he asked her to come over to point out the location of all the bodies. However, it was obvious that Zhongqing didn't help at all. Zhongqing's crime wasn't serious because she wasn't involved in the entire incident at all. Even if she informed her 2 brothers to kidnap Suchu, it was through the phone. In addition, she didn't follow Jing Yunjiao and didn't know the crime scene, so at most, she didn't report it. Moreover, the situation she knew wasn't about the explosion or the murder case. Of course, Jing Yunjiao's previous testimony also played a huge role. If Jing Yunjiao insisted that Zhongqing was the instigator, then she could also accuse the other 2 brothers of the Zhong family. With a witness, Zhongqing wouldn't be able to deny it even if he wanted to. However, compared to staying in prison, Jing Yunjiao hoped that Zhongqing would be able to get away with it. Jing Yunjiao walked to the front and spoke to the police officer. The other party then walked a little further away. "Is human meat delicious?" Only then did he ask. She stared at Zhongqing with a cold expression. In an instant, she saw that cute face as white as silk and empty eyes staring at her. "Jing Yunjiao. It's you again," Zhongqing muttered. Why was she everywhere? And why was she still alive when Hu Chong died? Didn't they die together? Moreover, Hu Chong clearly said that he was just going to teach her a lesson. He said that he was going to lock her up in the factory for a night and release some snakes, insects, rats, and ants to scare her. But who knew that in just one day, the situation would change so drastically? The factory exploded. The news spread like wildfire. When she heard about it, she panicked. She knew that Jing Yunjiao and Su Chu were inside, but if someone found out that there were people inside, they would definitely investigate. They might even find out about her. Just as she was complaining about Hu Chong causing the accident, the police came to the door and turned the entire house upside down. Most importantly, they found the bodies in the basement. At that moment, the bodies were moved out of the basement one by one. They looked especially terrifying, and her legs went weak. She wanted to leave, but the police stopped her. And they were killing people. The air was filled with the smell of corpses. Those corpses were only about 5 meters away from her. It was so scary. Zhong Qing's expression was unfocused. Her brain was not listening to her. When she heard Jing Yunjiao talking about human flesh, she was in a trance for a long time. Then, she said in fear, "I don't know. I didn't kill them. Jing Yunjiao, why do you want to harm me? I didn't kill anyone." Didn't? Yes, she didn't. But if she didn't have the space, then she did. Although Hu Chong was the mastermind and had a motive, Zhong Qing was his accomplice. She was the one who almost killed Su Chu and her. Now, she was saying that she didn't kill anyone. She clearly had that idea, didn't she? But she didn't dare to do it herself. If she really died, everything would be proven to have nothing to do with Zhong Qing. Zhong Qing would feel lucky and think that she, a bad person, deserved to die. Chapter 530. Jing Yunjiao suddenly sneered and stood in front of her. His expression was arrogant and sarcastic, as if he was looking at a dirty thing. His eyes revealed a strong sense of disgust. "Zhong Qing, you didn't kill anyone, but did you eat people?" As Jing Yunjiao spoke, he suddenly stepped forward and pinched her chin, making her stare at the 6 corpses on the ground. He continued, "Did you see that? Although you didn't kill these people, you accompanied Hu Chong and swallowed them into your stomach bite by bite. So let me ask you, is human meat delicious? Seeing such pitiful old people and children, don't you feel that you have tainted them? Zhong Qing, you think you are smart, you think you are the messenger of justice. How can you not even know what is hidden in the place where you live? You and Hu Chong have sex on the bed every day, occupying everything in this family. Have you ever thought that they, who were lying in the basement, have been staring at you through the stone wall? Stop talking." Zhong Qing struggled hard and was in extreme pain. She didn't eat human meat. How could she eat human meat? She kept comforting herself, but her mind kept thinking about the scenes of those days. Hu Chong was busy in the kitchen. She looked at his back and saw how he took care of the family. She even felt that such a man was very charming. Every time before eating, she would take a deep breath and smell it with a satisfied face. Then, she would give Hu Chong enough face and tell him that this was the best home-cooked meal she had ever eaten. Every bite, Zhong Qing only felt as if a large black cloth was covering her eyes. It kept gathering and gathering, covering her vision. She didn't have any strength in her body and was about to faint. At this moment, Jing Yunjiao took out a silver needle from nowhere and directly pierced one of her acupuncture points. Suddenly, her mind was incomparably clear. "You don't want to listen to me just because you don't want to." Jing Yunjiao's face was filled with cruelty. He stared at her with a slightly childish face and said fiercely, "Miss Xiao Qing, you really didn't disappoint me. There's not a single clean spot on your body. You found excuses for yourself and said that you're different from those ladies. Now, you're honored to prove that you're indeed different. Compared to you, they're still very clean. They're not like you, having so much fun with a dismembered demon, living in the same room and having fun every night." After Jing Yunjiao finished speaking, he ruthlessly flung the man aside. Zhong Qing instantly lost his balance and felt his body rushing towards the corpses. She wanted to stop, but her body was out of her control. In the blink of an eye, she felt a nauseating sensation on her hands and face. He knelt in front of the corpse, his entire body pressed against the corpse. That smell was familiar yet terrifying. Ah! In an instant, Zhongqing screamed. Her sharp voice attracted everyone's attention. Under everyone's gaze, they saw her crawling forward on the ground, as if someone was grabbing her. Her movements were abnormally slow, but she was still struggling. She kept shouting, "Don't come over. I didn't kill anyone. I didn't kill anyone. Don't come over." The corner of Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. His expression was cold. The surrounding air seemed to have frozen at this moment. The sound of breathing was so clear. Zhongqing rolled on the ground and crawled. The police hurriedly went forward, but no one could touch her. She continued to shout and scream. She looked like she had gone crazy. Unfortunately, Zhongqing couldn't go crazy. That needle of hers would keep her awake. Now that she was like this, it wasn't that she was crazy, but that she was afraid. Chapter 531. Every time I see Yunjiao like this, I feel shocked and unfamiliar. Xiao Haiqing stood at the door and looked at him from afar. She moved her lips and said softly. Jing Yunjiao's eyes seemed to be filled with 1,000 layers of resentment, like a vengeful spirit that wanted to take someone's life. His entire body exuded a cold aura, as if he was isolated from the world and no one could touch him. Xiao Haiqing walked over and tugged at Jing Yunjiao. "Are you trying to scare her to death?" Jing Yunjiao relaxed. "She won't go crazy. I'm just teaching her a lesson. What's the big deal? This is just the beginning." She almost killed her and Chu Chu, and even caused Li Xiaoyun to get injured while trying to save her. What's the big deal with scaring her? What she wanted was for her to live in pain and struggle for the rest of her life, never to be free. She had died once, so she knew what it felt like to die. Despair, fear, and being surrounded by coldness. It was because she understood and experienced it that she cherished her life more than anyone else. However, there were many things in her life that were more important than her life. No matter what Zhongqing's intentions were, she had touched her bottom line by using Suchu to threaten her. It was unforgivable and unforgivable. Jing Yunjiao glanced at Zhongqing, who was currently going crazy, and her lips slowly curled into a smile. "All right, let's go eat." "Okay." Xiao Haiqing breathed a sigh of relief. However, when they were about 10 meters away from the Hu residence, Xiao Haiqing suddenly paused. "That. Yunjiao, let's eat some vegetarian dishes tonight." "I agree," Tang Zihua said weakly. His illness was finally cured by Jing Yunjiao, but this was the first time in a long time that he felt like he was going to die. It was too scary, too disgusting. He even wondered if Jing Yunjiao was a normal person. His gaze paused on Jing Yunjiao's face for a moment, and he was a little flustered. "Yunjiao, my mind is full of those corpses. I'm only fit to eat light food now." Jing Yunjiao nodded and walked to the alley in front of her before turning a corner. Suddenly, she bumped into a sturdy chest. She looked up and saw the man's deep eyes looking over. The next moment, he grabbed her arm and glanced at her. "Why did you run out here instead of staying in the hospital?" The distance between them was quite close, and there was a hint of ambiguity. Jing Yunjiao was stunned for a moment. "Shouldn't you be lying in bed?" She took a look. The injury was quite serious. After all, he had blocked such a big rock for her. "I'm not as weak as you think." As he spoke, he glanced at the few of them. His gaze lingered on Tang Zihua and Gan Jinchen for a few seconds before he said, "I think I heard you guys say that you're going for a meal. Let's go together." Jing Yunjiao turned to look at the few of them. They hesitated for a moment, but it was obvious that they were too embarrassed to refuse, especially Gan Jinchen and Tang Zihua. As Jing Yunjiao's few male friends of the same age, they did not help at the crucial moment. Instead, they had to rely on this young Master Li. They were grateful, but at the same time, they were a little jealous. Seeing him invite them, they nodded not long after. Li Xiaoyun was wearing a white shirt. He was about 1.85 meters tall, with a slender figure and a strong presence. He exuded the steadiness and gentlemanly aura of an adult from head to toe. His every move was better than the two little boys. However, the two boys were not willing to admit defeat. They continued to raise their heads and stick out their chests. Chapter 532. As Li Xiaoyun drove, he glanced at the rearview mirror and saw the two boys looking like they were ready to fight. He smirked and drove straight to the nearest barbecue restaurant. Although he didn't see what the corpse looked like, someone reported the situation to him without missing a word. Li Xiaoyun had a clear goal. When the car stopped, the faces of the three people sitting in the back turned green. Jing Yunjiao glanced at them and said, "Why don't we go to another restaurant? You guys are still growing. It's better to eat more meat," Li Xiaoyun said with a smile. "That's right. I'm fine with it. Let's go here," Gan Jinchen and Tang Zihua said together. Jing Yunjiao was stunned and a little surprised. Didn't they say they wanted to eat something lighter? Moreover, they had just seen something so heavy. Now they wanted to eat meat. Could they stand it? Jing Yunjiao was about to ask when the two got out of the car. Tang Zihua walked to the front passenger seat like a gentleman and opened the door for Jing Yunjiao. Li Xiaoyun looked and raised his eyebrows. His smile was bright but strange. After they went in, they quickly sat down. Li Xiaoyun picked some dishes on the list and handed it to them. Tang Zihua and Gan Jinchen looked at each other and realized that although Li Xiaoyun had ordered a lot of meat, there were also many vegetarian dishes. They heaved a sigh of relief. But before they could celebrate, they heard Li Xiaoyun say, "It's late now. Girls will gain weight if they eat too much meat. So, the two of you can eat vegetarian. As for us three men, we can't live without meat." The words "can't live without meat" made Tang Zihua and Tang Zihua's lips twitch. So the meat was ordered for them. They thought it was an even split. Xiao Haiqing was amused. As long as they didn't let her eat meat, she didn't care what others ate. Besides, who asked these two to be so stubborn? It was a fact that Li Xiaoyun had saved Jing Yunjiao. The two of them, on the other hand, were acting like eagles protecting their cubs. She really didn't know what they were fighting for. Jing Yunjiao was about to speak up for Tang Zihua, but Xiao Haiqing secretly kicked her and winked at her with a smile. Soon, everything was gathered, and he started working on it himself. The meat sizzled as it was stained with oil. Li Xiaoyun leisurely placed the seasoning in front of him. Then, like a gentleman, he helped Jing Yunjiao and Xiao Haiqing roast some ingredients and started tasting them. Tang Zihua and Gan Jinchen were dumbfounded. He had also tried to roast it, but his nose was filled with the smell of corpses. At this moment, no matter how fragrant the meat was, he still felt his scalp go numb and unbearable. Looking at Li Xiaoyun's elegant eating manners, the two of them couldn't sit still anymore. They wished that time would pass slower so that they wouldn't have to fill their stomachs with this meat later. "It's almost burnt. Aren't you going to eat?" Li Xiaoyun chuckled. Tang Zihua's mouth twitched. He gritted his teeth and placed a few pieces of meat in front of him. These pieces of meat didn't have any similarities with the corpses they had just seen. However, as long as there was the word meat, it was hard to swallow. After a while, the two of them adjusted their moods and put the meat in their mouths. However, at this moment, they heard Li Xiaoyun say faintly, "There are some cannibals in He Province. After their clansmen die, they will eat them as souvenirs and leave some bones behind to preserve. Therefore, human meat can be eaten. It's not poisonous, just a little disgusting." Chapter 533. As soon as Li Xiaoyun finished speaking, Gan Jinchen and Tang Zihua's mouths stopped moving. In the next second, the two of them rushed out and vomited their guts out again. Jing Yunjiao was speechless. She rolled her eyes at him and said, "Is it fun to bully them like this?" Hiss! Li Xiaoyun suddenly paused and moved his body. Jing Yunjiao saw him frowning in pain and quickly asked, "Did you hurt your wound?" "It's okay." Li Xiaoyun pretended to smile and said, "Oh right, Jiao, what did you say just now about bullying them? What's wrong?" Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. She was sure that Li Xiaoyun did it on purpose. Forget it. Jing Yunjiao withered and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Sometimes, she felt that Li Xiaoyun was unbelievably mature, but other times, he was childish to the extreme. He was an adult, yet he was trying to be brave with Gan Jinchen. He didn't have any integrity left. Xiao Haiqing found it very interesting, especially when she saw Li Xiaoyun pretending to be weak in front of Jing Yunjiao. She laughed in her heart and said, "All right, Yunjiao, Li Xiaoyun is your savior." Who asked those two outside to compare themselves to Li Xiaoyun? Aren't they asking for trouble? At the mention of savior, Jing Yunjiao's expression changed. She thought of the moment when Li Xiaoyun stood in front of her. She picked up a piece of meat from the iron plate and stuffed it into Li Xiaoyun's plate. Li Xiaoyun didn't say a word. After stuffing it into his mouth, he put down his chopsticks and didn't move again. He stared at Jing Yunjiao. Jing Yunjiao couldn't help but laugh. She grilled a few more pieces for him. Xiao Haiqing's eyes lit up. The two of them were back and forth. One was grilling vegetables and the other was grilling meat. However, they weren't preparing for each other. They didn't look like friends, but more like lovers. "I'll go out and see them." Xiao Haiqing smirked, got up and walked out. However, the moment they stepped out of the door, Xiao Haiqing dragged the two boys who were almost done vomiting but didn't want to go back. On the way back, she sent a message to Jing Yunjiao, telling her that they were going back to see Su Chu first and wouldn't be eating. "Thank you for your hospitality, Li Xiao." Jing Yunjiao looked at the message and pursed his lips. At this moment, Li Xiaoyun reached out and touched her lips lightly. He said in a faint voice, "Something's on your lips." "Thank you." Jing Yunjiao didn't think too much and wiped her face with a tissue. Li Xiaoyun held back a smile. "What should we do? With so much left, it's not a good habit to waste. The meat is yours. I'll take care of the vegetables." Jing Yunjiao also had a headache when he saw that more than half of the food was left. "Aren't you afraid that I'll get sick of you?" Li Xiaoyun smiled faintly. "Didn't you say that men should eat more meat?" "Why? I can say that to others, but not to you." Jing Yunjiao replied with a smile, not to be outdone. "But I'm injured." Li Xiaoyun knocked on the table and said, "My back will hurt when I do it. However, if you continue to grill for me like you did just now and feed me a few more times, maybe it'll be fine." Jing Yunjiao rolled her eyes at him. When she was grilling the meat just now, she also tasted it. The food she grilled was not as good as Li Xiaoyun's. He seemed to have a strong talent for picnic food. The taste of his food was different from other people's. However, he insisted on eating the food she grilled. She didn't know if there was something wrong with his taste buds. "I'm only selling my skills, not my body. Grilled meat is fine. If you want to eat, take it." Chapter 534. After Jing Yunjiao said that, she couldn't help but laugh. "How about this? You sell your art, and I sell my body. The price isn't high anyway, I guarantee you can afford it." Li Xiaoyun moved closer and looked like he was joking, but his eyes were very serious. Jing Yunjiao's hands paused, and her mind went blank for a moment. She suddenly remembered how Li Xiaoyun's mysterious brothers called her, and a trace of panic flashed through her heart. Li Xiaoyun was indeed a little too good to her. Since she had to deliver the goods for Yu Tianxian, she often communicated with Du Lin. She learned from Du Lin that Li Xiaoyun didn't like to interact with others in the past, and he wasn't very kind to the people around him either. Now, he looked like a normal person, especially when he was with her. He was calm and simple, without the slightest hint of arrogance or irritation. Li Xiaoyun never gave her a bad attitude and was always very gentle. Moreover, Li Xiaoyun would be the first to know anything that happened to her, like a radar that followed her around. Jing Yunjiao's face was slightly red, but her expression was the same as usual, a little uneasy and cold. She glanced at Li Xiaoyun and suddenly said, "I'm still a child, I can't find a gigolo." I can't even when I'm older." Li Xiaoyun's mouth twitched. "Gigolo?" He was speechless. If he knew that selling his body would be like this, he wouldn't have said anything. However, seeing that she was still a little immature, Li Xiaoyun rubbed his brows. "Are you promising me that you won't get into a relationship before you're an adult?" There were quite a few fresh meats in that school. All of them were youthful and innocent. Most girls would have their first love fantasies, but he didn't want the little girl he liked to be snatched away by someone else. "You can say that," Jing Yunjiao said unexpectedly. Her current requirements for the future were very simple: study, make medicine, and practice medicine. As for men, she would wait until she grew up. Although her Yuling wine was very good now, it was certain that there was a gap between it and Li Xiaoyun. However, thinking of this, Jing Yunjiao's heart stopped, and a trace of surprise flashed through her eyes, but she quickly suppressed it. Perhaps it was because Li Xiaoyun was the most outstanding man by her side that she would unconsciously compare her future with his. At this time, Li Xiaoyun did not show any disappointment. Instead, he was very interested in adding a glass of water for her. Jing Yunjiao was a little absent-minded during the meal. In the end, Li Xiaoyun's meat was all gone, but there were a lot of vegetables left in front of her. She looked at him anxiously, and Li Xiaoyun helplessly helped her clean up before leaving. The two of them returned to the hospital one after another. Su Chu was still unconscious, like a sleeping beauty. 2 days later, Su Chu woke up from her coma. When he saw that he was in the hospital, he was even more stunned. "What happened to me? Why are you all here?" "Oh, right. Cousin, Zhongliang and Zhongyi must have drugged my cup just now. After I drank it, I felt really sleepy." Jing Yunjiao chuckled, Xiao Haiqing's mouth was twitching, and other people admired Su Chu's luck. After experiencing such a big thing, she still didn't know anything. She was not frightened. She was like a well-behaved little white rabbit. "Well, you've been sleeping for 3 days. I want to find a prince to kiss you and see if I can wake you up." Xiao Haiqing didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Chapter 535. 3 days. Su Chu exclaimed, but when the voice was high, she felt that her throat was very uncomfortable. "Liar. Grandpa, I haven't taken the assessment yet." The next second, she looked at Grandpa Gan with grievance. The old man shook his head helplessly, and his eyes were red. "Silly girl, how can the assessment be so important? It's not your fault this time. Grandpa won't punish you." Su Chu was stunned for a moment. She tilted her head and looked at Jing Yunjiao. "Cousin, what's going on? Am I still not awake? Grandpa actually said that the assessment is not important. Is she still dreaming?" From childhood to adulthood, she has never missed the assessment every month. Even if she was very tired on the day of the assessment, the old man still would not let her find excuses. He even told her that she had to be prepared for hard work to study medicine. But now, she actually said that it was not important. The sun must have come out from the west. The old man was also speechless. His granddaughter was a silly girl. "It's clear that the 2 brothers of the Zhong family did drug you, and then sent you to a factory in the suburbs. This is the news. Take a look." Jing Yunjiao handed over the computer. Su Chu was still confused, but when she saw the factory, her eyes seemed to stare out. She pointed to the picture of the explosion above and couldn't close her mouth. "No? Cousin, why did they send me to the ruins?" "Ah, did they find someone to bully me?" As she spoke, tears instantly fell down her face. Jing Yunjiao's forehead was instantly drawn with countless black lines. The bullying in Su Chu's words should refer to, right? This imagination is too rich. Xiao Haiqing looked at her like this, and suddenly laughed out. "Are you stupid? Look at the news carefully. This factory exploded after you entered. You were kidnapped at that time, and you were not violated by any other people. And Yun Jiao went to save you alone and protected you, so you were not hurt at all. Now you are fine." Su Chu is so cute at this time. She was angry, wronged and scared. Her tears were almost drowning the ward, and she kept sobbing. As soon as Xiao Haiqing said, Su Chu stopped. "Liar, such a big explosion, how can I not die?" Several people in the room also looked at her speechlessly. "Why didn't you die?" In fact, they also wanted to know. Of course, they didn't think it was a pity, but it was too miraculous. If the police and ambulance didn't send people to the hospital and explain the situation with certainty, they wouldn't even believe that Jing Yunjiao and Su Chu were in the explosion range. After all, although the 2 of them had inhaled some smoke and poisonous gas, it wasn't very serious, especially Su Chu, who didn't even seem to be affected by the explosion. In the past 2 days, the police asked Jing Yunjiao several times in a row, hoping that she would tell them the situation of the explosion in detail. After all, This kind of miracle was too unbelievable. Unfortunately, Jing Yunjiao said the same thing, only that she was very scared at that time and could only protect Suchu as much as possible. As for why other places were seriously injured, but she and Suchu were still normal, she didn't know this point. After a few times in a row, everyone now accepted this explanation. They thought that it might be because of the airflow. After all, there were many magical things in this world. But now Suchu didn't believe it. After saying that, she wiped her tears and laughed. Okay, I know, you are teasing me. Chapter 536. Dad, Mom, can you kick Zhongliang and Zhongyi out? These two people are too bad. Even if it's a prank, they can't joke about other people's health and safety. How can sleeping pills be taken indiscriminately? Suchu said angrily. When she thought of her sleepy reaction after taking the medicine, she felt a little scared. When Suchu's parents heard this, a trace of sadness flashed across their faces. Chuchu, don't worry. Now those two people don't live in our house, and the school has already expelled them. Although Zhongliang and Zhongyi only wanted to teach Suchu a lesson, the result was very serious, so they were taken in for education. Zhongqing was luckier because during the kidnapping process, it was Hu Qiong who contacted the two brothers. Although Zhongqing played the role of a bridge, he didn't participate in the kidnapping. The two brothers didn't give up Zhongqing at all, so Zhongqing was like an innocent person in this incident. In addition, with Jing Yunjiao's testimony, now that the police confirmed that Zhongqing didn't cooperate with Hu Qiong to kill the family of 6, they had already released him. Jing Yunjiao had already asked Hua Zei to look at him. Expelled? Suchu was stunned. Yes. Their Su family didn't owe the Zhong family anything. They provided them with food, drinks, and education, but in the end, they dared to drug her. This kind of person was simply biting the hand that fed them. Suchu still felt that the explosion was just a few people teasing her at this time. She didn't think much about it at all. Suchu's parents had long regretted it. If they hadn't led the wolf into the house, their daughter wouldn't have been in such danger. But fortunately, Suchu wasn't frightened during the process. If it left a shadow, they, as parents, would be distressed. Now that Suchu woke up, she ate something not long after. Although her body was still a little weak, she recovered quickly and looked quite energetic. However, not long after, when the police came to inquire, Suchu was dumbfounded. Was she really kidnapped? Moreover, it was such a serious explosion case. Suchu looked at the police with a stunned face. Uncle, I thought I just slept. She didn't even feel like she had slept for 3 days. No wonder her parents' eyes were red when they looked at her. And her grandfather, who used to be the most strict, was also very gentle now. It turned out that she had really gone through a life and death situation. Suchu's feelings were complicated and contradictory. It was an explosion, and it was something closely related to her. She actually fell asleep the moment she closed her eyes. Now, everyone was asking her if she really didn't feel it at all. This made her feel really awkward, as if she was the god of sleep. After the policeman left, Suchu was crying and laughing at the same time. It's so embarrassing. Look at the way the policeman looked at me just now. He didn't even believe me. For some people, even if they were unconscious, the outside world would more or less be reflected in their minds through dreams. However, Suchu did not. She even slept very soundly. She was too embarrassed to tell others that she was having a sweet dream. You can laugh secretly. If you really saw the situation at that time, wouldn't you be scared to tears? Xiao Haiqing reached out and handed her half of the orange. She ate a piece and said. Suddenly, Suchu nodded like a chick pecking at rice. Fortunately, I fainted. Otherwise, I might have been scared to cry and scream. When that time comes, the prisoner might be angry and detonate the bomb in advance to kill me. Hearing this, the people around them were overjoyed. At least she had some self-awareness. After Suchu woke up, it was no longer a big problem. After another day of hospitalization, she was discharged from the hospital. Chapter 537. Li Xiaoyun's ward next door had long been empty. Those strange-looking men had also disappeared. Li Xiaoyun was like Superman. He didn't take his injuries seriously at all, which made Jing Yunjiao and the others worry for a while. Outside the hospital, the rain turned sunny. The sun shone through the glass, and the surroundings shone faintly. Su Chu had gone through such a big disaster. Her parents felt like they had regained something they had lost. They quickly slowed down their work and wholeheartedly took care of her for a few days. Su Chu, on the other hand, still felt a little guilty and happy. After all, no matter what other people said, she herself had never felt any danger. Yet, in the end, she received so many people's concern. Even her parents became more and more obedient towards her. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was overwhelmed by this favor. On the contrary, when she thought of Jing Yunjiao, her godcousin, she felt guilty. Although Jing Yunjiao told her that Hu Qiong was targeting her and she was just implicated, it was still Jing Yunjiao who saved her in the end. If it weren't for Jing Yunjiao, she definitely wouldn't have been so lucky. However, the care Jing Yunjiao received in comparison was pitiful. Even though Jing Yunjiao was her maternal grandfather's god-granddaughter, both his maternal granddaughter and god-granddaughter met with an accident at the same time, so there was definitely a difference in the amount of concern. Moreover, because she was only a god relative, there was a bit of politeness in her concern. Towards Jing Yunjiao, this biological granddaughter, it was completely different. As for those classmates and friends, after all, they couldn't be compared to family. Therefore, when Su Chu thought of Jing Yunjiao looking at their family of 3 in the ward, she felt guilty. It was like showing off their love in front of Jing Yunjiao, right? It would more or less give her a little stimulation. However, it had to be said that Su Chu was indeed thinking too much. When she saw that Su Chu was cared for, Jing Yunjiao envied her for a moment, but in the blink of an eye, she threw it to the back of her mind. She clearly knew that what she had was different from others. She couldn't compare, and there was no need to compare. Jing Yunjiao went back to Cozy Garden as usual. Su Chu and Gan Jinchen stayed in her house for the time being. She was the only one left in the house, which was quite peaceful. However, Jing Yunjiao seemed to be going to school as usual and not taking the explosion case seriously, but in fact, he had already started to deal with Zhongqing. Hu Qiong was dead, and even his body had been blown up. There was a murder case in the Hu family. Moreover, the owner of the house was not her, so she naturally could not continue to live there. Helpless, Zhongqing begged the man she met before. This man's name was Zhao Qing, and he was arranged by Jing Yunjiao. The car and his outfit were all made by Jing Yunjiao. Before the explosion, Zhongqing could still repeatedly say no to this man, but now that he had nothing to rely on and couldn't find a job, he could only hope for Zhao Qing's help. With Jing Yunjiao's permission, Zhao Qing brought her to a place to settle down temporarily. However, this place was even worse than the Hu family's house. It could only be considered a shelter from the wind and rain. Everything was extremely shabby, and it was very noisy upstairs and downstairs. It was like a slum. When Zhongqing saw this place, she was dumbfounded. Zhao Qing had such a good car and dressed so decently. How could he find such a house for her? Even if it wasn't a villa, it should be a high-end community. Brother Qing. This house. Zhongqing looked wronged, as if she had been insulted. Zhao Qing smiled and said, Qing, I know you have a backbone and don't want to take advantage of me. So after thinking about it, I decided to bring you to my hometown to stay temporarily. Back then, I started from scratch here. It's very meaningful. In this lifetime, I've only brought you here. Chapter 538. Zhongqing's expression became better. Qing, you're the most unique woman I've ever met. All the women outside are after my money, only you aren't. I know that I used force on you before and you hate me, but I promise that I'll treat you well in the future. From today onwards, I won't force you. I'll respect you. This place isn't worth much, so you can stay here for the time being and don't feel like you owe me anything. When you have a sense of security and can completely trust me, I'll marry you. How about it? Zhao Qing continued. These words were extremely mushy. Zhao Qing felt like vomiting as he spoke. However, these words were all recited word by Jing Yunjiao. If he didn't say it, he wouldn't be able to get the money. Zhongqing had always been self-righteous. No matter how good others were to her, she could still pick out 10,000 problems with them. Previously, when Zhao Qing found her, he used force. He was completely on the offensive of a domineering CEO. At that time, Zhong Qing said that she didn't want it, but her body became more and more honest. Now, this domineering CEO suddenly became a central air conditioner. It was completely a state of for your own good. Zhong Qing suddenly had a bitter feeling that she couldn't speak of. Previously, she had a place to live, but now, she didn't. She couldn't be picky. But now, Zhao Qing actually said that he would respect her and not force her to do things that she didn't want, but she wanted it now. She wasn't a masochist. How could she hope to live in such a poor place? There were also some indecent places in the surroundings. It was a complete mess. However, she couldn't say no. After all, Zhao Qing was her only hope now. He kept saying that he liked her self-esteem, self-love, and backbone. If she suddenly changed her mind and asked Zhao Qing to buy a house for her, Zhao Qing would definitely not like her. Thinking of this, Zhong Qing's heart trembled. She felt a little regretful. Why did she stubbornly say no to Zhao Qing before? She caused him to misunderstand her meaning now. Unfortunately, no matter how unwilling he was, Zhong Qing had nothing to say. He even had to bite the bullet and say, "Don't think that I will thank you. I will earn my own money to pay you back the rent. However, this job isn't that easy to find. You don't have any money right now. You can't even afford a wardrobe. I can give it to you, but you won't accept it. Qing, I think you shouldn't mention the rent. Even if you don't pay, others won't think that you're my mistress. Pay. Don't underestimate me. I know I'm in urgent need of money. How about this? You lend me the money and I'll write you an IOU. One day, I will prove to you that I, Zhong Qing, am not a cheap woman." Zhong Qing immediately said. Zhao Qing looked like he was in a difficult position. In the end, he sighed and said, "Ari, I really don't know what to do with you. Alright, then how much do you want?" Zhao Qing took out a pen and paper and asked. "Let's make it clear, it's borrowed. Just borrow 30,000 yuan first." Zhong Qing said again. In the past, when she was in a relationship, her boyfriend would give her a lot of beautiful clothes, not to mention bags and shoes. She didn't spend any money, so she didn't know their value. However, after she moved to Hu Chong's place, she didn't have any new clothes to wear. She went to the store to take a look. The cheap ones didn't look good, and the quality couldn't compare to the ones she used to wear. She didn't want any of the clothes she used to wear in the Hu family. When she saw them, she thought of the smell of corpses. Therefore, she had to change them all. She had to dress up beautifully and go out to look for a job in her best condition. She would definitely get better and better. Chapter 539. A trace of mockery flashed across Zhao Qing's face, but he paid the money without hesitation. Zhong Qing wrote down the IOU very seriously. Every stroke was neat and tidy, as if she was worried that others would doubt her determination to return the money. The next day, Zhong Qing went to buy a few sets of clothes, inside and outside, plus some bags and shoes. She spent 6,000 to 7,000 yuan directly. After doing all this, Zhong Qing redid her hairstyle, intending to start from scratch. She bought a lot of cosmetics and some accessories on the way. The things were not the best, but they were not cheap either. As a result, she had spent more than 10,000 yuan in one day without finding a job. The place where Zhong Qing lived was considered the gray area of Huaning County. There were some black hair salons, some small casinos that operated in the middle of the night, and some informal private clubs. There were also many hooligans nearby. When she returned to the street and got out of the car, she was immediately surrounded by a few people. Robbers. Except for the clothes she was wearing, all the new things she bought and the rest of her money were instantly snatched away. It was hard to say in other places, but in this dark area of Huaning County, Jing Yunjiao could guarantee that his words were absolute. Although the title of Black Devil King was not pleasant to the ears and sounded like a man's name, as long as these three words were involved, all the hooligans would treat him like a god and would definitely complete the task very diligently. Zhong Qing was dumbfounded. The things she had spent a day buying were all gone. She thought that her luck had turned for the better by avoiding jail. She did not expect to get worse. Just as the hooligans left, some men came over and touched her up and down. "Little girl, you look good. How much is it?" Zhongqing was stunned. "I'm not, no." The man smiled. "Little girl, it's a pity that you're not in this line of work with such a good foundation. Look at the woman opposite you. She's in her 40s and doesn't look good, but she earns a few thousand yuan a month. If it were you, I guarantee that you'll earn a lot of money every day, and the customers will come back every day." As he spoke, he casually wiped a handful of her thighs. Zhongqing trembled, but she still looked at the opposite side subconsciously. That gorgeously dressed woman was indeed not very pretty. How could she earn money with that kind of aptitude? During this period of time, when she was looking for a job, she kept hitting a wall. Every time someone came to find trouble with her, she was already a little desperate. At this moment, after hearing the man's words, Zhongqing couldn't help but hesitate. Her body had already been ruined by Meng Lin. Later, there was Hu Qiong and Zhao Qing. In addition, she had also signed a contract with others. She could be considered as someone who had seen the big world. She also knew that it was indeed easy to earn money in this industry. The same trap was placed in front of him, but to Zhongqing, it was a temptation. However, on the first day, Zhongqing still chose to leave. Her heart was uneasy. At night, when Zhao Qing was not around, she felt that the surroundings were frighteningly cold. What was more coincidental was that she seemed to be able to hear the squeaking sounds coming from the bed upstairs, as well as the panting of a woman and a man. It was like a curse that lingered in her mind. Zhao Qing did not return for a few days. His phone was not connected and he only left a message saying that he was on a business trip. All the money on her was robbed. She went out to look for a job during the day, but it was to no avail. At night, she was so hungry that she could only go out to see if there was a place to eat. However, there were men everywhere who looked at her and drooled. On the third night, under the rumbling of hunger, Zhongqing picked a club and walked in. Chapter 540. Zhongqing's appearance was pure, and she was considered to be the most outstanding among women. In addition, she was born with the kind of physique that attracted men. The boss was also a shrewd person, so naturally, he would not push her away. Immediately, he signed the contract with Zhongqing. However, Zhongqing was very short of money. She was a little desperate, and with Hua Zei's people behind her, she would not get much of a share. She was almost treated as a money-making tool, but she did not realize it at this time, thinking that she could finally support herself. Work began as soon as she entered the industry. Zhongqing was wrong about one thing, and that was that this place was different from Imperial Pleasure Royal Court. There were not many women here, and they were not high class. One night did not cost much. Most importantly, there were not many successful men here. Some were even vulgar and rude, and the women here were simple tools to vent their desires. Even at this time, Zhongqing still felt that she was different from others. She had entered this industry because she was desperate. Therefore, when she looked at other young ladies, other than disgust, there was only contempt. Those women were so dirty. They were completely different from her. However, the customers felt that they were all the same. It was just that she did not know it. On the first night, Zhongqing had business. The first man was in his 50s and looked especially dirty. She immediately rebelled when she saw him, and directly asked the boss to change him. "I don't want to stay in the same room with such an ugly man. Look at his body, he reeks of smoke, and his breath stinks. He even wanted to kiss me just now." Her voice was proud and angry. However, when everyone heard that, they were only left with sarcasm. "Xiao Qing, where do you think we are? Do you have the right to be picky?" After the boss finished speaking, he slapped her. "Go. Apologize to the customer and serve her well. Otherwise, I will kill you." The customer was also angry, but at the same time, it made him want to conquer her. Look at this woman, she was delicate and beautiful. She looked as if she was pure and ignorant of the world. At one glance, he had the urge to hold her in his arms and train her well. This man had a bit of a bad temper. The more he met someone with a fierce personality who would rather die than submit, the more he would be determined to do it. Zhong Qing was stunned by the slap. Before she could react, the old man had already carried her and entered the room without saying a word. The women here were sold. Even if he touched them forcefully, no one would find trouble with him. Zhong Qing's resistance was like a joke. It would only make the people in the same industry look down on her even more. They even thought that she was deliberately attracting the attention of others in order to gain more benefits. Immediately, he offended almost all of his peers. In the past hour, Zhong Qing had been screaming non-stop as if he had gone crazy. The boss secretly smacked his lips. No wonder Hua Zei said that he was a weirdo. Indeed, he was right. To deal with such a person, one should use force. The old man came a few more times. Looking at the half-dead Zhong Qing on the bed, he lay there contentedly for a while before he put on his clothes and left. However, just when Zhong Qing thought that she was free, she was dragged out again to clean up and continue to entertain guests. When there was no police checking, this was a completely dark place. Only those who knew their place could have food and clothes. If they were tossed around, they would only die more miserably. In one night, Zhong Qing received nearly 10 men. She was already regretting it. The tearing pain kept coming from her body, and she suddenly felt like vomiting. However, she was afraid of being hit again, so she could only try her best to endure it. She looked at the guests pitifully. Chapter 541. The women in this clubhouse were basically willing, so no one would specially watch over them. Zhong Qing was a little different, so the boss gave her a little special care. Xiao Qing, you earned a lot of money tonight. I'll give you the balance at the end of the month. You have to think carefully. If you don't come, then you'll have nothing. You'll have worked for nothing tonight. In the morning, before Zhong Qing left, the boss looked at her and smiled. Zhong Qing shuddered. Money. She had been out for so long. Had she finally earned money? Although she had suffered a lot, it was not like before, where she was always fired for all kinds of reasons. She originally wanted to quit, but if she regretted it now, last night's work would be useless. She would not have anything to eat or drink. But now, at least she had something to eat to fill her stomach. Her thoughts were slowly changing. Looking at the faint sunlight outside, it was incomparably dazzling, and she was in a sorry state. Sure enough, he went there again the next night. As for her movements, Jingyun Jiao was clear as day. There were not so many places to make money in Hua Ning County. One had to pay a price. Although the name of the place sounded a little nicer, the transactions inside had never been clean. Moreover, most of the customers were ordinary men. It was impossible for her to hug the thighs of those men tightly. Appearance was indeed Zhong Qing's capital, but it also depended on what kind of place it was. Young people might still have the passion to be obsessed with beautiful women, but those men's age determined that they had more rich life experience. No one would be foolish enough to give the rest of their life to a woman who only knew how to make love in bed. Different men changed every day. Tall, short, fat, and thin. Naturally, there were some perverts among them. From the beginning, she was picky. Slowly, 2 months later, Zhong Qing had become very slick. She learned how to snatch customers, learned how to use a charming smile to make men surrender early. She even forgot that she had an old lover called Zhao Qing. And 2 months later, Zhao Qing returned. Seeing the man at home, Zhong Qing was stunned for a moment and hurriedly rushed up. Brother Zhao, you're finally back. I've been living so hard these days. Zhao Qing was also stunned. He could not help but admire the importance of environment to a person. At this moment, there was nothing but vulgarity on Zhong Qing. Even the tone of her voice had changed. I heard you sold yourself, the man asked. I didn't do it on purpose. I can't find a job, I can't eat, and that boss forced me. I can only do this. Brother Zhao, where have you been these days? I can't find you, I'm going crazy. She looked like an abandoned woman. Zhao Qing snorted coldly in his heart and said, Xiao Qing, I didn't expect you to suffer such grievances. It's all my fault. Come, let's go get our marriage certificate. I'll marry you, and from now on, I won't let you suffer the slightest bit. Zhong Qing was stunned. So Zhao Qing had such deep feelings for her? During this period of time, she had thought that he had abandoned her. But when she thought about it, she was still living in her old house. Feeling touched, he quickly nodded his head. He was even worried that Zhao Qing would go back on his word. That very day, he took the household register and rushed to the Civil Affairs Bureau. In just a short while, Zhong Qing was already a married man. "Hubby, I'm already yours, but I've done a lot of bad things to you in that place. Everyone nearby knows about it, so I think I should move away. I want to live with you." Chapter 542. Zhong Qing looked at the man in front of her affectionately. She was like a little woman who was in the midst of happiness. Her eyes were hazy with tears as she tugged at his arm. She seemed to be acting coquettishly and pleading at the same time. No man would be able to tolerate such an expression. Zhong Qing was extremely happy. During this period of time, many men looked at her with very explicit eyes, which made her hate it. When she thought that she could move out of the slums immediately, she felt the blood in her body begin to flow happily. Also, her husband was a successful man. He was handsome, gentle, and devoted. Such a man was probably hard to find in the world. Jing Yunjiao, that shameless little bitch, wanted to harm her, but she relied on her own ability to find happiness. That stinky girl would definitely be jealous to death. However, the wicked had their retribution. She couldn't wait to let Jing Yunjiao see the life she was going to live in the future. Zhao Qing glanced at her and led her into the car. He didn't answer directly, but said, "Let's go home." The car was driving in the direction where Zhong Qing lived before. "Hubby, I don't have anything to move. I don't want those things that I used before," Zhong Qing said again. Zhao Qing didn't say anything. After returning downstairs, he stopped the car. In the next second, he saw a few people walking out of the building. Zhao Qing handed over the key. Before he went home, he began to take off his suit. Zhong Qing was dumbfounded. Within a few minutes, Zhao Qing's appearance had changed. He was bare-chested and wearing underpants. Without saying anything, he dragged her upstairs. "Wife, you're mine from now on. First, serve me well." As soon as he entered the house, he didn't even close the door and directly pounced on Zhong Qing. "Wait. Hubby, what happened just now?" Zhong Qing quickly asked. Why did he take off his clothes downstairs just now? Also, the car was driven away by someone. "Qing if I don't have money, will you still love me?" Zhao Qing asked. Zhong Qingxin panicked for a moment, but she looked at Zhao Qing and nodded with certainty. How could he say that he didn't have money? Besides, as the saying goes, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse. Even if Zhao Qing's company went bankrupt, it would still be better than her being a young mistress here. Zhao Qing coldly snorted in his heart before he smiled. "I'm a poor man. Previously, I was a chauffeur for a wealthy family, and now that family has fired me. Xiao Qing, our family will have to rely on you in the future." Zhong Qing's lips twitched. "You must be lying to me." "Lie to you? Do I look like I'm lying?" "Xiao Qing, you're not going to abandon me after hearing this, are you? Let me tell you, even if you run to the ends of the earth, I will still be able to catch you." The man suddenly became ferocious, suddenly strangled her neck and said, "From today onwards, I will bring people over, you will receive guests for me in this house. You are not allowed to go anywhere, or I will break your legs, let you not stand up in this life." The sudden change made Zhong Qing tremble. He looked at the man in front of him in disbelief. He did look very domineering before, but now that he didn't have that outfit, he looked a little disgusting under his ferocious appearance. Zhong Qing shook her head repeatedly. "Hubby, don't scare me. What's going on? We're married. How can you let me stay in this house?" No, aren't we moving to your house?" Chapter 543. The man smiled. His smile was sloppy and a little vicious. He stared at Zhong Qing with a mocking expression. "My house. This is my house. No, it's not like that. You clearly said." Halfway through her sentence, Zhong Qing was stunned. "You're a liar." In fact, he didn't say anything. He only wore a decent outfit and drove a decent car. The rest were vague hints. For example, he said that this was his hometown, the place where he started from scratch. However, he never said where he was currently living. Every time they met, it was almost like a dragon or a phoenix. Other than that, they rarely talked. She knew nothing, but she had never doubted it. How could this be? Was it all fake? Zhongqing's heart was trembling. She stared at the man in front of her with suspicion and fear. Especially when she thought of what he had just said, she was shocked and afraid. What do you want to do? What do you want to do? What do I want to do? You're my wife now. What do you think I want to do? From today onwards, you'll be responsible for subsidizing the family. Don't forget, you still owe me 30,000 yuan. By the way, don't think about calling the police or running away. It's useless. This street is not clean. The police know it very well. No one likes to meddle in other people's business. Also, you're my wife. In the past, when you sold yourself, I didn't despise you. If you run and tell others that I forced you, who will believe you? As Zhaoqing spoke, he reached out and began to pull off Zhongqing's clothes. It can't be like this. Get lost. Who are you? You're not Zhaoqing. It's impossible. Zhongqing cried. How could it be? The man she liked was so outstanding. How could he be such a pervert? I'm Zhaoqing. Oh, I forgot to tell you. This house is indeed passed down from my parents. When I was young, I accidentally killed someone and was locked up in prison for many years. After working hard to reform myself, I finally got out. Unfortunately, my parents were angered to death by me. There's no one else in the house except me. So in the future, other than earning money, you only need to serve me, Zhaoqing said. What Zhaoqing said was naturally true. When Zhaoqing was in his teens, he got into a fight and caused the death of someone. Ever since then, he had been in prison. He was only released a few months ago, but he couldn't find a job and had no source of income. Furthermore, he harbored resentment in his heart. Ever since then, he had been idling around. His looks weren't bad, so he could go around tricking people. He was also ruthless enough. He stole and robbed, provoked Hua Zei, and was ruthlessly beaten up. Later on, Jingyun Zhao needed to find someone who looked not bad and also knew how to act, so Hua Zei found him. He was naturally happy to be able to earn money and find a woman, especially a beautiful woman like Zhongqing. It would be a waste if he didn't go for it. Moreover, although his looks were not bad, it would be difficult for him to find a wife. He even had to find a wife who could earn money to support the family. After thinking about it, love was the most suitable. As for what she relied on to earn money, it didn't matter as long as she could support him. To Jing Yunjiao, it was just two scumbags hanging out together. There was nothing to gain from it. Now that Zhaoqing said this, Zhongqing was completely dumbfounded. Murderer? She was so frightened that she didn't dare to move. She allowed Zhaoqing to torment her body. This wasn't the first time, but this time, because of the change in her identity, Zhongqing only felt disgusted and wanted to vomit. Why exactly did she have to live such a life? Zhongqing was filled with resentment and confusion. Zhaoqing directly locked him in the inner room. Zhaoqing bought a long iron chain from somewhere and locked Zhongqing in it when he went out. Chapter 544. Zhongqing had completely become Zhaoqing's sexual tool. Every night, other than Zhaoqing himself who wanted to consummate the marriage, he had to bring others over almost every day. Zhaoqing took a photo of her. In the photo, she was beautiful and had a sweet smile. Many men would especially come to take a look after seeing the photo. Every cent of income naturally went into Zhaoqing's pocket. Other than eating and drinking, Zhongqing had almost no other human rights. This situation continued until a month later, Zhongqing saw red. After Zhaoqing found out that she was pregnant, he became a little worse. He directly bought medicine for her to abort the child. The child itself could not be kept, because these days, Zhaoqing would buy some stimulant drugs from various sources. If the child was born, the problem would naturally not be small, and it might even die in the stomach. After the abortion, Zhongqing's expression was a little absent-minded. In the past, she still knew how to shout and resist, but now she had become a little numb. Thinking back to the child, she did not even know whose it was. It could be Meng Lin's, or it could be Zhao Qing's or Hu Qiong's. It could even be the customers when she sold herself. The medicine that Zhao Qing gave her was not safe. After taking it, Zhong Qing directly bled out. Only then did Zhao Qing quickly send her to the hospital. Zhong Qing wanted to ask for help, but Zhao Qing threatened her that if she dared to say anything wrong, he would kill her. After being frightened, she could not tell the truth to others. In addition, when Zhao Qing entered the hospital, he showed a warm and gentle look. He told others that his wife used to work in a dirty place. Not only did she use medicine indiscriminately, but she was also pregnant with someone else's child. As a result, the doctors and nurses looked at her with disdain. No one was willing to say a word to her at all. It was not easy to save her life, but Zhong Qing still had to continue living the same life as before. However, compared to Zhao Qing's previous coercion, Zhong Qing had already begun to cooperate, trying to get better treatment from Zhao Qing. Because of the medicine she took before, the hospital determined that she would never be able to have a child in the future. Zhong Qing did not even know whether to be sad or happy. The resentment in his heart had never dissipated, but now he didn't know who to resent. After a few more months, Zhong Qing's appearance was no longer as pure and cute as before. Wrinkles even began to appear on her face, making her look like a crazy woman. There were all kinds of scars on her body. Some were caused by customers whipping her, some were burned by customers with candles or cigarette butts. Even her lower body was a mess. Not only that, Zhong Qing began to feel that something was wrong with her body. After begging Zhao Qing for a long time, she finally had a chance to go for a checkup, but she discovered that she had contracted a sexually transmitted disease. Shock and despair. He felt as if his long life had always been filled with darkness. After returning from the hospital, she saw that Zhao Qing was still oppressing her. In the end, she took a fruit knife and stabbed him. A few months ago, she kept telling the police that she didn't kill anyone. But now, after killing someone, she went straight to the police station with a knife. She looked crazy and kept shouting, "I killed someone. Quickly catch me. I really killed someone. Zhao Qing is dead." After being tortured for a few months, when there was no hope in life, he was sent to prison. However, life in prison was obviously not easy. Who asked Zhong Qing to do a job that women hated the most? Many of the prisoners in prison had their families destroyed by the mistresses of the vixens outside, which was why they went on a path of no return. Therefore, when Zhong Qing went in, endless torture began again. Chapter 545. Zhong Qing's miserable state was planned by Jing Yunjiao from the beginning to the end. When she knew that she went to prison in despair and pain, Jing Yunjiao felt relieved. She never wanted to hurt people, let alone use the cruelest way to hurt a woman. But for Zhong Qing, she had no choice but to be ruthless. That woman was even worse than Hong Wen in the past. Although Hong Wen was bad, she was righteous and self-righteous. However, Zhong Qing was so bad that she looked like a fool. Even though she had helped Hu Qiong kidnap Su Chu, she still had to face others with the attitude of a helpless victim. This kind of person couldn't be reasoned with. It was as if everyone in the world owed her. Since that was the case, then let her blame fate. In the gloomy days of Zhong Qing, a major event also happened outside. The fall of Ning City's leader. Almost all the forces in Ning City were wiped out. Deputy Mayor Lu succeeded in taking over the position of the leader. As for the Meng family, they had become a thing of the past. The people of the big families in Ning City knew that the Meng family had offended someone, but no one knew the specific reason. It was as if a force had descended from the sky to make things difficult for the Meng family. In a short period of time, the power and status of the Meng family had disappeared. The comrades of Meng Lin's father also tacitly didn't appear. Some of them were even investigated. These days, almost all the people related to the Meng family were in danger. But fortunately, there would be a day when the dust would settle. The situation of the Meng family didn't affect Jing Yunjiao much. She didn't even participate in it. She was still the influential figure in the school. But on this day, an extremely exciting thing happened in the class, and that was the change of a substitute teacher. Chi Da-yong ran to Jing Yunjiao and Xiao Haiqing and said with a flaunting face, "I heard that the new physical education teacher is a man. He is very handsome. The female teachers in our school are all eyeing him." Jing Yunjiao smirked. Every class only had 2 PE classes a week, and their class 1 had practically recruited all the top students in their grade. The school placed a lot of importance on their studies, so the PE class would often be taken up by other teachers. Therefore, even if the new teacher was handsome, they wouldn't be able to see him for long, so there was nothing to be excited about. Xiao Haiqing didn't even raise her eyebrows. It would be fine if our form teacher was a little more handsome, but a physical education teacher? What does it have to do with us? Only other classes have PE classes. Now that she was going to be in her 3rd year of high school, the rest of her time had been squeezed out by the school. The corner of Chi Da-young's mouth twitched. "My uncle is already so old, but I heard that he was pretty good when he was young. By the way, I heard from uncle that the new PE teacher seems to be very overbearing. He said that he has to pay attention to the students' health. I'm guessing that he might return our PE lessons to us in the future." Chi Da-yong added. He was teacher Chi's nephew, so his words naturally had some authority. Jing Yunjiao and the others were surprised, but they were also a little curious. After all, a domineering PE teacher was rare. They didn't know if he was really as handsome as Chi Da-yong said, to the point that women would scream. Sure enough, there was no teacher to inform them to self-study during the 4th period. The students were like little eagles that flew out of their cages, rushing to the field one by one. They lined up neatly and looked up. Not long after, they saw a slender figure slowly walk over. His eyes were scrutinizing, and he had a faint smile. He looked amiable, but inexplicably made people feel a sense of fear. Chapter 546. Jing Yunjiao looked over along with everyone else. Her gaze was fixed on the familiar face, and the corner of her mouth twitched. Li Xiaoyun. The new PE teacher was actually Li Xiaoyun. Jing Yunjiao was instantly dumbfounded. As far as she knew, not just anyone could apply for this PE teacher position, right? Especially in a school like No. 1 middle school. Not to mention the PE teacher, even the school security guard at the entrance had higher requirements than other schools. Seeing Jing Yunjiao's suspicious gaze, Li Xiaoyun chuckled. The next second, he said, "Jing Yunjiao, lead the students for warm-up exercises." The students were surprised. The previous PE teacher also liked Jing Yunjiao. Her voice was loud and clear, and it wasn't noisy, so she would often lead the team. Who would have thought that after changing teachers, Jing Yunjiao would be the one to lead the team? Also, this PE teacher was indeed a little handsome, but he seemed a little familiar. It was rare to see such a handsome man. In addition, he mentioned Jing Yunjiao as soon as he opened his mouth, so it didn't take long for the students to be shocked and start whispering. Isn't this the handsome guy who came to our school to look for Jing Yunjiao? I've seen him before. He's the owner of Tian Xiong restaurant. A classmate treated me to a meal before we split classes. I ate there before. When Xiao Weimin came to the school to cause trouble, Li Xiaoyun appeared. At that time, Jing Yunjiao gave Xiao Weimin a vicious beating. Not only was Li Xiaoyun not surprised at all, he even helped Jing Yunjiao snatch someone else's desk. The past surfaced in their minds, and the students became more and more lively. Jing Yunjiao walked out of the team and stood in front of Li Xiaoyun. After looking at him with some confusion, she calmly led the group for warm-up exercises. Her figure was on the skinny side, but her body proportions were excellent. Her simple movements had a unique sense of beauty. Li Xiaoyun stood at the side and watched with raised eyebrows. However, when his gaze swept past the students, he noticed that there were a few boys who kept staring at Jing Yunjiao. After the warm-up exercises, Li Xiaoyun directly said, 3 rounds for girls, 10 rounds for boys. Class monitor and Jing Yunjiao will lead the team. As soon as he said this, the boys immediately wailed. However, this was not the end. 10 laps wasn't a small number. By the time they finished, they were almost out of breath. Some of them even fell down a few times. Li Xiaoyun wasn't in a hurry. He increased the intensity of the few boys. When the girls were resting, Jing Yunjiao couldn't help but walk over and ask, "How did you suddenly become a teacher? Didn't you promise me that you wouldn't fall in love at such a young age?" "I'm here to inspect." Li Xiaoyun smiled wantonly. The results of the inspection were acceptable. Among the group of boys, those who were fair and good-looking had very weak bodies. Those whose bodies were strong didn't have good looks. Jing Yunjiao's taste shouldn't be that bad, right? Moreover, with him as a comparison, he did not believe that the woman he fancied would be snatched away by someone else. "How did you get in? It can't be that he used force on the school's leaders, right?" Jing Yunjiao was a little speechless and doubtful. Li Xiaoyun sneered, as if Jing Yunjiao insulted his character. "I just handed your principal my resume, and he immediately took the initiative to invite me to be your physical education teacher. What can I do?" Of course, that resume was naturally different from the average person. For example, what kind of military rank he had, what kind of missions he had done, and the euphemism that he had to come. Chapter 547. However, Li Xiaoyun wouldn't tell Jing Yunjiao about those things, lest she think he wasn't tough or a good person. Jing Yunjiao looked at him suspiciously and pursed her lips. "You've already been investigated? When are you resigning? Your brothers have already returned to the capital, right? Will you be fine if you don't go with them?" She couldn't understand Li Xiaoyun's identity. What kind of military system allowed him to wander around so unscrupulously as if he had nothing to do? "Didn't I have to wait until you're 18 years old?" Li Xiaoyun said matter-of-factly. As he spoke, he reached out to stroke her hair and smiled. "I forgot to tell you that I'm your guardian now. It's perfectly justifiable." Jing Yunjiao stared at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean it literally. In the past, your guardian was the Qiao family. Later, it became the school and the town committee. But in reality, they didn't care about you at all. So, I'm taking responsibility to take care of you so that you won't be bullied in the future. Isn't that good?" Li Xiaoyun continued. It was just a change of guardian. Jing Yunjiao didn't have parents or relatives. How could he not do it with his status? Jing Yunjiao was completely dumbfounded. After a few seconds, she frowned. "What are you doing? I don't need a guardian. Moreover, this guardian was Li Xiaoyun. There shouldn't be any relationship between them, right? Zhao, you're still underage. You need someone to watch over you, right?" Li Xiaoyun's attitude was very firm. "No need." Li Xiaoyun. Jing Yunjiao was also a little angry. How could this person be like this? Ignoring her wishes and directly overriding her. "Zhao, are you angry?" Li Xiaoyun instantly withered and looked aggrieved. "As your guardian, I can legitimately help you in the future. During the school parent-teacher conference, there will also be someone to speak up for you. I'm not ugly and won't embarrass you. I'm also a little strong and can help you vent your anger. Now that I've found such a job, I can also ensure your safety in the school. In addition, I can support myself and don't need you to take care of me. Isn't this a good thing?" When he said that, it was as if he was asking her to keep a dog and watch the door. Jing Yunjiao was angry and amused at the same time. "I'm fine on my own. I'm strong enough. I don't care if no one upholds justice for me," Jing Yunjiao said. "You despise me?" Li Xiaoyun interrupted. "No. What did this have to do with dislike?" Jing Yunjiao was speechless. Li Xiaoyun snorted. "Zhao, it's wrong to lie." Li Xiaoyun, you're being unreasonable." Jing Yunjiao secretly held his forehead. "But I'm already entangled with it." "Zhao, you know that I'm not in good health. We'll be living under the same roof in the future. You can help me recuperate," Li Xiaoyun added. "Stop." Jing Yunjiao raised his hand. "When did I say that I would live under the same roof as you? Li Xiaoyun, don't mess around. Otherwise, I won't care if you saved my life or not. But I'm your guardian. You won't just abandon me like this." Li Xiaoyun was deep in thought. "Or, you don't trust me?" Jing Yunjiao's mouth twitched. "I'm not talking to you. You're being unreasonable. You despise me." Li Xiaoyun went further away. "No." Jing Yunjiao was about to go crazy. Stay away from me. She couldn't get angry, especially when Li Xiaoyun was acting so shamelessly. He changed his attitude faster than flipping a book. Li Xiaoyun looked at her angry face and smiled. Ah Zhao, you look like a round pufferfish now. Chapter 548. Jingyun Zhao glared at him. Her cold face gained a bit of cuteness, but she still had her guard up, causing Li Xiaoyun's smile to deepen. Towards Jingyun Zhao, he naturally couldn't use force. She had always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. Right now, he had forcefully become her guardian, but on the surface, he couldn't act like he was strong enough to force her to submit to him. He had to coax her and go along with it. It would be best if he could show off his own weak points, lest Jingyun Zhao instantly turn into a round pufferfish or a prickly hedgehog. Li Xiaoyun. Jingyun Zhao's eyes were serious. She continued, "Don't force me to be angry with you." Li Xiaoyun had helped her a lot, especially with the explosion and the appearance of the Jing family's strange parents. After spending so much time together, she naturally saw him as one of her own. Especially when Li Xiaoyun risked his life to block the danger for her, she had to admit that her heart throbbed a little at that moment. She had lived 2 lives, and no one had ever stood up for her or protected her in her previous life. Now that Li Xiaoyun had appeared, it was impossible for her not to be moved. But gratitude and acknowledgement were 2 different things. She had never thought that a guardian would appear out of nowhere one day, and even say that she wanted to live under the same roof as him. Li Xiaoyun had a place in her heart, but she had never thought of relying on Li Xiaoyun's ability to survive. She owed him a favor, and if there was a chance, she would definitely repay it. She didn't want to owe him more. Seeing Jingyun Zhao so affectionate, Li Xiaoyun knew that she was going to explode. He thought for a while and said seriously, "Ah Zhao, I promise that I won't get involved in your private affairs. I'm just a guardian. When you need it, I'll help you get some rights. If you don't want to live under the same roof as me, that's fine too," Li Xiaoyun said. Anyway, he was just joking. With Jingyun Zhao's temper, she would never agree no matter what. He was very clear in his heart. "Li Xiaoyun, you're simply a scoundrel," Jingyun Zhao choked out. He knew that she couldn't do anything to him. If it was someone else who really touched her bottom line, she would definitely be at loggerheads with him. However, Li Xiaoyun was different. Li Xiaoyun curled his lips into a smile. Under the sunlight, his shadow curved slightly as he moved closer to Jingyun Zhao and said, "Ah Zhao, I'm just a little shameless towards you. To others." He didn't have such thoughts at all. Jingyun Zhao exhaled. "Only this once. Next time, you have to tell me if you have anything to do with me." "All right," Li Xiaoyun replied immediately. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. The battle was successful. "Also, don't do anything in the name of my guardian," Jingyun Zhao added. There was only a little more than a year left before she reached adulthood. It wasn't a long time, and it wouldn't affect her much. Moreover, Li Xiaoyun was different from Qiao Weimin. He wouldn't use this relationship to order her around. Sure. Li Xiaoyun was extremely easy to talk to at this moment. Jingyun Zhao turned and left. Li Xiaoyun pursed his thin lips slightly as he stared at the few boys in the class and continued to teach them. With Li Xiaoyun in this school, the teachers' lives became more colorful, especially at the parent-teacher conference not long after. When Li Xiaoyun appeared as her big brother, almost everyone's jaws dropped. Since then, Jingyun Zhao realized that the attitude of all the female teachers towards her had become more and more amiable. It wasn't just the teachers, even the female students became more and more enthusiastic. Jingyun Zhao's drawer had stacks of love letters. Some were for her, but most were for Li Xiaoyun, her nominal big brother. Chapter 549. Jingyun Zhao stuffed the stacks of love letters into Li Xiaoyun's arms time and time again. Seeing his slightly stunned and helpless expression, only then did her mood become slightly better. It had to be said that Li Xiaoyun as her guardian had indeed brought her a lot of convenience. In the past, most of her classmates looked at her with a bit of sympathy. Even if her grades were excellent and her martial arts seemed omnipotent, they would still be a little careful when talking to her, as if they would inadvertently touch on her humble feelings. But now, with the addition of Li Xiaoyun, the attitude of these classmates changed from sympathy to envy. Since she accepted Li Xiaoyun's arrangement, Jing Yunjiao did not complain anymore. She calmly prepared for the coming third year of high school. Her life was still unique. A few months later, the air was a little hot, ushering in Yu Ling Wine's anniversary. Jing Yunjiao, the behind-the-scenes boss, naturally had to attend. In a year, Yu Ling Wines had already made a name for itself. Now, it was famous in the entire Ning city. Its products had even begun to spread throughout the country, and orders were overwhelming. It was just that Yu Ling Wine's factory area was limited. This year, while operating non-stop, it had also begun to expand the factory. The turnover was in the tens of billions. Because most of the raw materials came from Jing Yunjiao's space, the proportion of net profit was also very high. A new company like this was almost impossible to find in the country. Yu Ling Wine Company's success was within Jing Yunjiao's expectations. After all, the recipes left behind by the old ancestor were all top-quality treasures. Anyone who had tasted it would definitely be able to tell that it was different from the rest. Thus, this kind of growth speed to her wasn't even considered amazing. It could definitely be better. Ning City, a prosperous city. Pak Yuan personally drove Jing Yunjiao to the most luxurious hotel in Ning City. The stars were bright, the atmosphere was tense, and the air seemed to be exuding a faint wine fragrance. When Jing Yunjiao entered and saw the lively scene, her eyes shone with a bit of pride. Although everything in Yu Ling Wines was managed by Pak Yuan and Xiong Jin, any large-scale changes had to be approved by her. This company was also completely promoted by her. Yunjiao, Brother Bai is really kind. He even specially sent people to pick us up. Later, please thank him on our behalf, Xiao Haiqing said. As soon as Pak Yuan entered, he was surrounded by a group of people. At this moment, he was exchanging greetings with the merchants. This banquet could be said to be an occasion for the merchants to cultivate relationships and explore opportunities. The higher-ups hunted prey that caught their eye, while the prey looked for food that could fill their stomachs. Accompanying Jing Yunjiao was Xiao Haiqing, Su Chu, and Gan Jinchen. As for Tang Zihua, he was naturally accompanying Elder Tang. All the merchants in Ning City knew that the connections behind Yu Ling Wines were extremely amazing. It was difficult for ordinary people to see Elder Tang, but he also treated Yu Ling Wines differently. Xiao Haiqing and the others only knew that Jing Yunjiao had a good relationship with Pak Yuan and Xiong Jin, but they didn't know her true identity. Therefore, when they came to such an occasion, they were more or less surprised. Biaojie, can these things be eaten casually? Su Chu tugged on Jing Yunjiao's arm. There was a lot of delicious food all around, making people's eyes dazzled. Jing Yunjiao nodded, but Xiao Haiqing smiled and said, "Be careful, you'll get fat." Su Chu glared at her. "It's rare to come to such a high-end occasion, what's the point of getting fat?" But Brother Bai's spending is really big. Did he contract the entire hotel? It must have cost a lot. Chapter 550. After Su Chu finished speaking, she had already rushed towards the pile of delicacies. She was wearing an exquisite pink gown today, her hair was tied into a cute flower bud, and she wore a delicate but simple pearl necklace around her neck, making her look slightly playful. Jing Yunjiao, on the other hand, was wearing a silver gown with a bit of long muslin trailing behind her. The skirt was slanted down from her knees, and the irregular style was like flowing mercury. It looked a little cool, but it didn't lose its youthfulness and elegance. The skirt was sparkling with diamonds, but it wasn't considered luxurious. "Haiqing, you're here too?" Su Chu and Gan Jinchen had just left, and Jing Yunjiao found a place to sit when a couple walked over and greeted Xiao Haiqing warmly. After saying that, they looked at Jing Yunjiao, and a look of surprise flashed past their eyes. They smiled and said, "I think my daughter should be basking in Miss Jing's glory, right?" The people who came were Xiao Haiqing's father, Xiao Daoan, and his wife, Jiang Rong. Xiao Haiqing was wearing a black gown, and she looked domineering. She glanced at Jiang Rong and smiled. "Isn't it easier to bask in Auntie Jiang's glory? Dad, you've gotten a lot of benefits from marrying a wife." Xiao Daoan looked a little awkward. After the Hong family fell, his life wasn't easy either. Without a big backer, he was naturally ostracized as a newcomer in Serene City. However, Jiang Rong's family wasn't bad, and they had some influence. At the crucial moment, they threw out an olive branch and helped him solve some problems. This time, he didn't receive an invitation, but Jiang Rong's father helped him find some connections. Although it was just a simple anniversary banquet, Yu Ling Wines had a lot of connections, and there was never a lack of people who came to the banquet. All of them were influential figures in Serene City. As long as he could find a few opportunities to get along with them, his life in the future wouldn't be too difficult. Of course, Jiang Rong's family wasn't very influential. They were just a local business and didn't earn much money, but Jiang Rong's father knew quite a few people. Hi Qing, it's all thanks to your auntie that our family is where it is today. Don't always drag us down, Xiao Daoan said. The next second, he stared at Jing Yunjiao and said, previously, when Miss Jing came to our house as a guest, I didn't treat you well. Next time, I promise I won't let you down. After such a long time, Xiao Daoan's skin became thicker. Jing Yunjiao sipped a mouthful of fruit wine and pretended not to hear anything. Xiao Daoan didn't feel disappointed. He glanced at them, then brought Jiang Rong to the other side and started to hand out name cards to the crowd. Xiao Haiqing muttered, "What a haunting spirit." At the banquet, everyone had their own social circles. The adults were discussing business, and there were also quite a few children gathered together. Jing Yunjiao and the other three were all quite good-looking. After a while, another person walked over and sat down nearby. My shoes were custom-made from country Y and cost a few $100,000. Look, isn't it beautiful? The girl struck a beautiful pose and waited for others to praise her. It's like the crystal shoes in fairy tales. It's really beautiful. Suchu immediately praised in surprise. Because this girl was sitting beside Suchu and was even staring at her non-stop, Suchu had no choice but to speak up to prevent others from saying that she was rude. However, when the girl heard that, she frowned. Crystal shoes in fairy tales? Was she mocking her for being Cinderella? The pearl on your neck is quite pretty, but why is there only one? It's not very big, and it's not very round. It's pretty, but it's not very eye-catching. Of course, it still suits you, the girl said again. Chapter 551. Suchu froze for a moment. She was indeed praising this girl earlier, but why did she feel that this girl was a bit hostile? However, this was someone else's event after all. She didn't want to stir up trouble, so she only said, "This was given to me by a friend. It's my favorite jewelry." Their Su family wasn't considered rich. Although she had a lot of pocket money, it naturally couldn't be compared to these rich kids. They gave away hundreds of thousands or even millions as if the money was blown by the wind. The girl smiled and didn't say anything. She raised her head and looked at the entrance. When she saw her friend, she hurriedly greeted, "Jiasi, I'm here." Hearing the familiar name, the few of them froze for a moment before turning their gazes over. They saw a girl walking in from the entrance. She had a head of big wavy hair and wore a bright red short dress. Her waist was surrounded by a circle of sparkling crystals. Her whole body exuded a powerful aura. She held the arm of a blonde man and leisurely walked over. She was clearly only 17 years old, but she was dressed like an adult in her 20s. Although she was indeed good-looking, her temperament was a bit too much. "Hello, long time no see." Jiasi glanced at Jing Yunjiao and smiled. Jing Yunjiao's gaze deepened. She had never forgotten the He family. The He family that used her biological parents as tools to control her. It was just that Jiasi had always been abroad. She didn't expect that she would come back after enduring for a year. Although this was Yu Ling Wine's anniversary, it was actually delayed by a few days. The company had been established for almost a year and a half. At this time last year, Yu Ling Wine's products were already on sale. It was just that they had just started. Today was a rather auspicious day. Moreover, the so-called anniversary banquet was actually just a gimmick to attract attention. "Miss He, have you recovered from your trauma abroad?" Jing Yunjiao directly asked. He Jiaxi snorted and laughed. What trauma? Jing Yunjiao, I went abroad as an exchange student. I'm not like you, who can only stay in that remote village and look at the sky every day. You don't have any experience at all. That's right, I heard that you're neighbors with the boss of Yuling Wines. You're really lucky to be able to climb up such a big tree, He Jiaxi said. As soon as she spoke, the girl who had walked over in the beginning also said in surprise, Jiaxi, so you two know each other? It's not like you don't know that I stayed in that lousy place in Huaning County for a few days. These are my classmates at that time. Oh right, this is Jing Yunjiao. Back then, he took good care of me. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to leave Huaning County so quickly, He Jiaxi said sarcastically. Previously, He Jiaxi was relatively restrained, but after coming back this time, she seemed to be somewhat flamboyant. Her hands were painted with bright red nail polish, which looked a little scary. She shook the wine glass and looked at Jing Yunjiao with contempt, saying, Do you want a drink? I don't drink with people with bad taste, Jing Yunjiao said directly. TCH, you're a good student, so you're only fit to drink fruit wine, right? He Jiaxi said lightly, then said, Although I was abroad, I heard a lot about you. I heard that you found your biological parents. Did they make you unforgettable for the rest of your life? At this point, He Jiaxi revealed a bit of pride. Although Jing Yunjiao exposed that pair of fake parents, she knew that it was Jing Yunjiao's weakness. Moreover, they did make her unhappy at that time. Chapter 552. Jing Yunjiao put down the cup in his hand and looked at her with dark eyes. He said coldly, It's only been a year and miss he has become like a mad dog, raising people in Shuitan town overseas. He Jiaxi clenched her cup when she heard that. For the past year, she couldn't forget the day she was tricked by Jing Yunjiao and her reputation was ruined. Even though it was Qiao Hongye who collaborated with that damn hooligan, Jing Yunjiao played the role of the Oriole and actually took a picture of all the hooligan's crimes. Not only that, she even handed it over to the police. She'd rather Jing Yunjiao take those things and exchange them for money from her than to see those filthy things exposed under the sun. At that time, everyone laughed at her, saying that she had bitterly followed Tang Zihua only to be tricked by a lowly hooligan in the end. They said that she boasted that she was the daughter-in-law of the Tang family since she was young, but in the end, she didn't get anything. Even those illegitimate daughters of the He family, her so-called sisters, could ride on her head and humiliate her in front of her father. All of this was caused by Jing Yunjiao. Qiao Hongye disappeared, so all the debts could only be placed on Jing Yunjiao's head and she had to pay them back one by one. He Jiaxi sneered, Whatever you say, but Jing Yunjiao, you're really special. I don't know if you have a guilty conscience or if you're a saint, but you actually let someone who lied to you stay by your side. That girl, she's called Jing Xiu, right? He Jiaxi pointed at the little girl who appeared beside Xiong-jin. The little girl kept looking left and right as if she was looking for someone. After looking around, she finally saw Jing Yunjiao and hurried over. She used to be called Jing Xiu, but now she was called Jing Fan. Jing Yunjiao hadn't seen her for a long time. Her appearance changed a little. She changed into a neat short hair, a pair of obedient eyes, and a bright smile. Ever since Jing Xiu changed her name to Jing Fan, she had always been by Xiong-jin's side. It was as if her life had started anew. Her whole person was brimming with vitality. Sister. She ran in front of Jing Yunjiao and called out sweetly. When He Jiaxi heard this, she said, Jejie? What a joke. Your elder sister just told me that you're not worthy. Look at how eager you are. Are you trying to get the cold shoulder? The people from the Jing family were found by her mother. Although she was abroad, she had seen everything. Naturally, she recognized them. Jing Fan's face paled and he looked at Jing Yunjiao in a daze. No, this is Miss He. She has the same surname as the person who bribed your parents, Jing Yunjiao said. When Jing Fan heard this, he immediately understood. Her eyes were filled with fear and disgust as she looked at He Jiaxi. If Mrs. He hadn't tempted her parents with money, even if they favored boys over girls, they wouldn't have done such a heartless thing, causing a good family to be torn apart. Little sister Jing Xiu, in fact, you should be thanking me in your heart. If it weren't for me, You'd still be washing clothes and cooking in that lousy village. You might not even be able to go to school. He Jiaxi sneered. When Xiao Haiqing and the others at the side heard this, they all had fierce looks on their faces. If it weren't for this kind of occasion, they really wanted to go up and tear apart He Jiaxi's fake beauty skin. Jing Fan bit his lips and sat down silently. He didn't say a word. When Jing Yunjiao saw He Jiaxi's arrogant look, a trace of sharpness flashed in his eyes. Miss He, are you here to cause trouble? If that's the case, I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to scram from this hotel. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.